The world, for Elara Vance, was a meticulously organized catalog of facts, figures, and foreseeable outcomes. As a literary archivist, her life was dedicated to preserving the past, not indulging in its chaotic, romantic fictions. So, when the heavy, cream-colored envelope bearing the swirling logo of Aegean Odyssey Cruises landed on her doormat, she regarded it with the same suspicion she would a misshelved incunabulum. It was her parents' doing, of course. A little surprise for her 30th birthday. With a sigh that fogged her reading glasses, she sliced it open. The words "Couples Sunset Serenade Cruise" seemed to pulse with a menacing, saccharine energy. 7 days. Strictly for couples. All accommodations double occupancy. Her stomach plummeted. She was to be paired with a stranger, a human variable in her carefully ordered equation, all for the sake of her mother's desperate hope that a forced proximity on the high seas would finally spark a romance that had thus far eluded her. Across the city, Leo Cavill was using a very similar invitation to level the wobbly leg of his drafting table. The paper was thick, expensive, and utterly useless to him. A couple's cruise? He who sketched fantastical cityscapes but lived in a pleasant, creative chaos of half-finished models and takeout containers, was the last person to be confined to a floating monument to coupledom. His sisters had chipped in for it, their collective, exasperated plea disguised as a gift. You need to get out of your own head, Leo. Meet someone who isn't a fictional character from your blueprints. Resistance was futile. The collective will of the Vance and Cavill families was a force of nature. And so, one blustery October afternoon, Elara and Leo found themselves standing on the gleaming, overwhelming gangway of the SS Elysian, two solitary figures adrift in a sea of intertwined hands and shared, loved-up smiles. Elara wore a crisp, navy blue linen dress, her chestnut hair coiled in a severe but elegant bun. She looked like she was attending a board meeting on the high seas. Leo, in a slightly rumpled linen shirt and trousers that had clearly lost a battle with an iron, looked like he'd been kidnapped from his studio. Their eyes met across the bustling terminal, a fleeting moment of shared, panicked recognition. They didn't know each other, but they knew their own kind. The conscripted, the reluctant, the gloriously single. They were processed with terrifying efficiency. Vance Elara. And you must be Mr. Cavill, a beaming attendant chirped, not waiting for confirmation. We've had a last-minute shuffle. You'll be in stateroom 714 veranda suite. Enjoy your romantic getaway. And just like that, they were ushered into a luxurious but alarmingly intimate cabin. A king-sized bed dominated the space, strewn with rose petals. A bottle of champagne sat chilling in a silver bucket. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a bubble of profound, echoing silence. Leo was the first to break it. He ran a hand through his already disheveled dark hair and let out a low whistle. Well, this is aggressively romantic. Elara placed her carry-on with military precision on the luggage rack. It's a logistical nightmare. The probability of this specific pairing error, given the passenger manifest, must be astronomically low. A grin tugged at the corner of Leo's mouth. She was even more formidable than she looked. I'm Leo. And I'm guessing you're as thrilled about this as I am. Elara, she said, her gaze sweeping the room, pausing on the single, vast bed. Thrilled isn't the word I'd use. Apprehensive, perhaps. Deeply inconvenienced. We could demand a change, Leo suggested, though the prospect of dealing with the cruise line's bureaucracy held little appeal. And spend the first 2 days of this voyage in a queue at the guest services desk, being pitted by every actually in-love couple on board? Elara countered, a sliver of pragmatism cutting through her dismay. No thank you. They stood in silence again, the gentle hum of the ship's engines a vibration beneath their feet. The ship was moving. They were trapped. It was Leo who saw it first, a flicker of an idea. You know, he began slowly, a mischievous light dawning in his hazel eyes. Our families have spent the better part of a decade subtly, and not so subtly, hinting that we should be a couple. My mom asks about you more than she asks about me. A faint blush colored Elara's cheeks. My father still believes you're the nice Cavill boy I dated briefly in university. I never had the heart to correct him. It was simpler that way. Right? Leo said, warming to his theme. So what if we just gave them what they want? Not for real, he added hastily, seeing her alarmed expression. But for this week, we play the part. The perfect loved-up couple. We lean into it. We have the most ridiculously, spectacularly romantic night of our lives, and then we go back to our regularly scheduled programming, with a hell of a story to tell. Elara stared at him as if he'd suggested they swim back to shore. You're proposing a sustained week-long act of theatrical deception? I'm proposing we turn a disaster into an adventure, Leo corrected, his smile widening. Think of it as immersive theater. We're the stars of our own romantic comedy. We can do all the obnoxious couple things we'd never normally do. We can win the most in love competition. We can order dessert for two and feed it to each other with a completely straight face. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. It was chaotic, ill-advised, and utterly contrary to every fiber of her being. And yet, as she looked at Leo's open, hopeful face, and then at the petal-strewn bed that represented a week of awkwardness, the plan began to hold a strange, rebellious appeal. It was a way to reclaim control. To mock the very institution that had forced them here. A slow, rare smile touched her lips. An experiment in performative romance, she mused. The data gathered could be fascinating. Leo's grin was triumphant. That's the spirit. So, partner? Do we have a deal? Elara took a deep breath, then extended her hand. It was a businesslike gesture in the midst of the insanity. We have a deal. But we need rules. Rules? Leo shook her hand, his grip warm and firm. Boundaries, Elara clarified. The bed has a demarcation line. No real physical intimacy beyond what is necessary for the public performance. And we debrief every evening. To ensure narrative consistency. Deal? Leo said, his eyes sparkling. Now, how about we crack open this champagne and plot our first move? The welcome dinner is in an hour. We have an audience to dazzle. The grand dining room was a symphony of soft lighting, glittering crystal, and the low, intimate murmur of 200 people in love. Elara felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the gentle sway of the ship. She was arm in arm with Leo, her fingers resting lightly on the crisp cotton of his sleeve. It felt alien, this point of contact. Ready? Leo murmured, his breath warm against her ear. The sensation sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. A physiological response to proximity, she told herself. Nothing more. Just remember the backstory, she whispered back. We met through mutual friends. We've been dating for 6 months. You're an architect. I'm an archivist. We both enjoy quiet evenings in. It sounded flimsy, a house of cards built on a foundation of parental assumptions. Their table was a round one for 6, already occupied by 2 other couples. There was Brenda and Mark, a bubbly pair from Ohio celebrating their 40th anniversary, and Chloe and Ben, intense yoga instructors who held hands even while reaching for the salt. Introductions were made. This is my partner, Elara, Leo said, the word rolling off his tongue with an easy familiarity that stunned her. He pulled out her chair, his hand brushing the small of her back as she sat down. The touch was brief, professional, yet it left a patch of warmth on her skin. The performance had begun. Leo was a natural. He charmed Brenda and Mark with stories of designing a community center, embellishing just enough to be entertaining without straying into outright lies. He listened, genuinely, to Ben's monologue on the spiritual alignment of chakras and architectural spaces. And throughout it all, he played his part with Elara flawlessly. A hand over hers on the tablecloth. A shared, private smile when Chloe declared they could feel their beautiful energy. He refilled her water glass before it was empty. He leaned in close to hear her quiet contributions to the conversation, his attention making her feel, for a fleeting moment, like the most fascinating person in the room. Elara, for her part, found her role more challenging. Her instinct was to dissect, to analyze, to correct minor inaccuracies in Leo's stories. But she forced herself to lean into the character. She smiled, a real one this time, when Leo made a witty remark about the ship's postmodernist decor. She found herself laughing, a genuine, uncalculated sound, when he managed to steer Ben onto the topic of the structural integrity of a yoga pose. During a lull in the conversation, as the main course was cleared, Leo turned to her, his expression soft. You're doing great, he whispered, his voice for her alone. It's strangely exhausting, she whispered back. The constant curation of expression. It gets easier, he said. Just look at me like you sometimes forget how handsome I am. She snorted, a very un-Elara-like sound, and quickly covered it with a sip of wine. Your modesty is your most endearing quality. See, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. You're a natural. After dinner they wandered out onto the deck. The moon had risen, a perfect silver coin casting a shimmering path across the inky black water. The air was warm and salty. Couples strolled past them, wrapped in each other, but for the first time, Elara didn't feel like an imposter. The performance had created a bubble around them, A shared secret that felt more intimate than any public display of affection. "Okay, debrief," Leo said, leaning his elbows on the railing and looking out at the sea. "How did we do?" On a scale of awkward first date to Oscar nomination. Elara considered it, leaning beside him. The wood of the railing was smooth and cool under her palms. "A solid B+. You were a bit heavy on the hand-holding, but your listening face is impeccable." "I've had a lot of practice with client meetings," he confessed with a chuckle. "And you?" "The laugh during my yoga architecture theory was a masterstroke. Very convincing." "It wasn't a performance," she admitted, surprising herself. "It was genuinely funny." He looked at her, the moonlight carving out the planes of his face. "Good." They stood in a comfortable silence, the facade momentarily down. Elara realized that the tension in her shoulders, which had been a permanent resident since boarding, had begun to ease. "So, what's next on the agenda for the world's most romantic couple?" Leo asked. Elara pulled the daily itinerary from her pocket, a habit of thoroughness. "There's a starlit waltz in the main ballroom in 20 minutes. Leo's eyebrows shot up. "Dancing? They didn't cover that in the rulebook." "The public performance clause covers it," Elara said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "It's a necessary component of the narrative. We can't be the only couple not on that dance floor." Leo pushed off from the railing and executed a formal, if slightly ridiculous, bow. "Then, my accidental date, may I have this dance?" The ballroom was a vision from a bygone era, all polished marble and swirling couples moving to a live orchestra playing a hauntingly beautiful waltz. Elara felt her confidence, so carefully constructed over dinner, waver at the threshold. "I don't actually know how to waltz," she confessed, her voice tight. "Don't worry," Leo said, his hand finding the small of her back again, this time with a firmer, more guiding pressure. "Just follow my lead. It's like architecture. It's all about structure and flow." He led her onto the floor, and his grip was sure and confident. One hand held hers, the other rested on her back, a steady, warm presence. 1 2 3 1 2 3, he murmured close to her ear, his voice a quiet rhythm against the music. "That's it. Don't look at your feet. Look at me." She forced her gaze up, meeting his. In the soft, golden light of the ballroom, his eyes weren't just hazel. They were a kaleidoscope of green and gold and brown, flecked with amusement and something else, something softer. She stopped thinking about the steps, about the rules, about the other couples. She simply let him lead, her body moving in sync with his, the world narrowing down to the pressure of his hand, the sound of his breath, the solidity of his frame against hers. It was nothing like she had imagined. It wasn't performative or awkward. It was effortless. As the music swelled, he spun her out and then back in, pulling her just a fraction closer than was strictly necessary. Her breath hitched. The demarcation line in the bed seemed a million miles away. "You're a quick study," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You're a good teacher," she replied, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears, softer, warmer. The song ended, melting into a slower, more intimate tune. The couples around them drew closer, swaying in place. Leo didn't let go. He simply adjusted his stance, his arms encircling her, and she, after a moment's hesitation, rested her hands on his shoulders. This was beyond the rules. This was uncharted territory. They swayed slowly, a tiny island in a sea of romance. Elara could feel the beat of his heart through his shirt, a steady counter-rhythm to the music. She was acutely aware of every point of contact. His hands on her back, her palms on his shoulders, the brush of his trousers against her dress. "This is nice," he said quietly, his chin nearly resting on the top of her head. "It's statistically anomalous," she whispered into his shoulder, the scent of his soap, clean and citrusy, filling her senses. He laughed, a soft vibration she felt through her whole body. "Elara Vance, are you admitting you're enjoying yourself?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the terrifying, undeniable truth was that she was. The experiment was yielding unexpected data. The variable was no longer just Leo, it was her own reaction to him. Later, back in the stateroom, the air was thick with unspoken words. The bed loomed larger than ever. They enacted their rule with military precision, building a fort of pillows down the center. They changed into nightclothes in the bathroom, taking turns like prisoners in a very luxurious cell. Lying in the darkness, listening to the sound of his breathing just a pillow wall away, Elara replayed the night. The dinner, the conversation on the deck, the feeling of his arms around her as they danced. It had felt less like a performance and more like a discovery. "Leo?" she whispered into the dark. "Yeah. The debrief. For tonight." I'd upgrade our score to an A. She heard his soft exhale, almost a sigh of relief. Me too, Elara. Me too. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of performative bliss, but the line between performance and reality began to blur like ink in the rain. They entered the Most in Love competition, a series of ridiculous games that involved feeding each other blindfolded. Leo got tiramisu on her nose and she laughed until she cried, and answering questions about each other. Here, Elara's meticulous mind was an asset. She knew his coffee order, black, 2 sugars, his favorite building, the Sagrada Familia, his arch-nemesis, leaky pens. Leo, to his own surprise, knew hers too, her favorite novel, Possession by A.S. Bayat, her organizational system, Dewey Decimal adapted for life, her secret passion, she was a closet fan of terrible disaster movies. They won. The judges, a panel of cruise staff and the ever-enthusiastic Brenda and Mark, declared their chemistry unmistakable. As they were crowned with ridiculous, gold paper crowns, Leo swept her into a celebratory kiss. It was meant to be a peck, a part of the act. But the moment his lips met hers, something shifted. It was soft and brief, but it wasn't perfunctory. It was a question. And when he pulled away, his eyes wide with the same shock she felt, she found she had no answer, only a dizzying, terrifying longing for more. The facade cracked. That afternoon, on a shore excursion to a stunning Greek island, they walked along a secluded beach, the crowns long forgotten. The easy banter was gone, replaced by a charged, fragile silence. "We should talk about the kiss," Elara finally said, her voice barely audible over the waves. "It was for the competition," Leo said, but his tone lacked conviction. He stooped to pick up a smooth, white stone, turning it over in his hand. "Wasn't it?" "I don't know," Elara admitted, a monumental confession for her. "The data is inconclusive." Leo stopped walking and turned to face her. "Elara, what is this? What are we doing? Because I'm starting to forget the rules." "I'm an archivist, Leo," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I deal in facts. In preserved, safe histories. You're not safe. You're all possibility and chaos and future." The word hung between them, vast and terrifying. "Is that so bad?" he asked, taking a step closer. "Maybe not everything needs to be catalogued and shelved. Maybe some stories are meant to be written as you go along." She looked at him, truly looked at him. She saw the creative chaos in his eyes, the kindness in his smile, the steadiness that lay beneath his disheveled exterior. She saw the man who had turned a nightmare into an adventure, who made her laugh, who held her like she was something precious on a dance floor. And she was terrified. "I can't," she whispered, taking a step back. "This was a mistake. It was an experiment. Experiments end." The walls were going back up, brick by frantic brick. The variable had become too unpredictable, the results too personal. The light in Leo's eyes dimmed. He nodded slowly, the hope on his face replaced by a careful neutrality. "Right. The rules. I get it." The rest of the day was a masterclass in polite distance. The romantic couple from the night before was gone, replaced by 2 polite acquaintances. The magic had shattered and the pieces were too sharp to handle. The final night of the cruise was the gala dinner. It was the grand finale, the event they had been supposedly building towards. They dressed in silence, Elara in a sleek black gown that felt like armor, Leo in a sharp dark suit that made him look like a stranger. They went through the motions. They smiled for the cameras. They made small talk with Brenda and Mark. But the spark was gone. The performance was hollow now, a pantomime of what had, for a few fleeting days, felt startlingly real. During the dessert course, Leo excused himself and didn't return. Elara sat, the chocolate soufflé turning to ash in her mouth. She had gotten what she wanted. The experiment was over. The variable was contained. So why did she feel like she was mourning a loss so profound it left her physically aching? She found him on their private veranda, leaning on the railing, watching the ship's wake glow with phosphorescence. He didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small against the vastness of the sea. "For what?" he asked, his tone flat. "For following the rules?" "You were right. It was simpler." "Was it?" The question escaped her before she could stop it. He finally turned to look at her, and the raw hurt in his eyes took her breath away. "What do you want from me, Elara? You built the walls. You defined the boundaries. I was just a willing participant in your experiment. But I'm not a variable you can control. I'm a person. And I think I started to have real feelings for the woman behind the rules. The one who laughs at my jokes and dances like she's forgetting the world and analyzes the statistical probability of everything. But if you don't want that, if you're too afraid to step outside your archives, then just say it. This was the conflict, the turning point. This was the moment the carefully constructed narrative collapsed under the weight of truth. Tears welled in Elara's eyes, hot and unwelcome. She who never cried. I am afraid, she confessed, the words tearing from her throat. I'm terrified. Because if I let this in, if I let you in and it goes wrong, the chaos would be unmanageable. My life is built on order. And what is order without life? He asked softly, taking a step towards her. What are your archives without a story worth living to tell? He was right. She had spent her life preserving other people's stories, too afraid to live one of her own. She had mistaken safety for happiness, order for meaning. And in pushing him away, she had been trying to preserve an empty, perfect shell of a life, rather than risk the beautiful, messy, unpredictable reality of a shared one. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't an experiment anymore. This was the real thing. Leo, she said, her voice shaking but clear. The experiment is over. He flinched as if bracing for the final blow. She took the last step that separated them, closing the distance. I'm terminating the research. Effective immediately. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. There are no more rules. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face, hope warring with caution in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want a debrief. I don't want a narrative. I don't want to play a part anymore. She took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm saying I think I have real feelings for you too. For the chaotic architect who turns disasters into adventures. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun rising over the Aegean. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. It's about time. This time when he kissed her, there was no audience, no performance, no rules. It was slow and deep and full of the promise of a story they would write together, one messy, beautiful, unpredictable page at a time. It was the answer to the question his first kiss had asked. The journey home was a different world. The pillow fort was gleefully dismantled. The silence was filled with easy conversation and the quiet comfort of two people who no longer needed to pretend. They talked about their fears, their hopes, what came next. There were no guarantees, but there was a mutual, exhilarating decision to find out. When the ship docked, they walked down the gangway hand in hand, not for an audience but for themselves. Their families were waiting on the pier, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hope. Elara's mother rushed forward. Well, how was it? Was it terribly awkward? Elara looked at Leo, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. She saw her future in his eyes, not a preserved, safe history, but a vibrant, uncharted map. It was. She began, squeezing Leo's hand. Accidentally perfect. 1 year later. The envelope was familiar, heavy cream stock with elegant script. This time, however, it was addressed to both of them at their shared apartment. A space that was a perfect, happy compromise between meticulous order and creative chaos. Leo slid it open with a drafting pencil. It's from Brenda and Mark, he said, a grin spreading across his face. He pulled out a card with a picture of the SS Elysian on it. They're renewing their vows. On the same cruise. They've invited us. Elara came to stand behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her chin on his shoulder. She looked at the invitation, then at the small, tasteful diamond ring on her left hand, a design Leo had sketched himself. Should we tell them we're already going? She asked, her voice laced with amusement. Leo turned in her arms and kissed her. I think we can keep it our little secret. For now. Their accidental date had become the prologue to their life's greatest romance. And the story they knew was only just beginning.